Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session of Tuesday Times Roundtable. Our Spring 2023 series continues today with Living in Limbo, Policy Implications on the Future of Immigration. My name is Michelle Zaldivar, your Senior Program Coordinator here at the Office of Global Learning Initiatives. TTR is our flagship discussion series that brings together multiple perspectives on current global issues and trends. You can learn more about TTR, watch past recordings, or come back and reference this one at go.fiu.edu/TTR. As a reminder, as we engage in today's session, we ask that everyone please use the mics. We've got roaming mics on either side of the room today for the audience so that we can all hear your contributions to the conversation on the recording. If you haven't already, please take a moment to sign in. The sign-in does open at 12:15 and close at 1:15. The QR code is posted around the room and up here on the screen if you haven't done so already. Give you a minute to get that. And if you're interested, you can read the article linked to today's Tuesday Times Roundtable at go.fiu.edu/TTR0221. So I referenced that link and the New York Times because Tuesday Times Roundtable is brought to you by a formal partnership with the New York Times that gives all students and faculty and community within FIU, anyone with an @fiu.edu email address, free digital subscription to the New York Times. So if you go to that short link to read today's article and you hit a paywall, all you have to do is go to accessnyt.com, sign in with your @fiu.edu email address, and you'll have a free digital subscription until your graduation year. My medallion students and my Enacting Global Learning micro-credential students, please make sure to take a screenshot or save that PDF of your sign-in, your confirmation for points, right? You've got to submit your points log at the end of the semester. And if you're interested, our GL peer advisor hours are officially up and running. We have our first virtual session today at 4:15 to 5:15. You can visit that at go.fiu.edu/drop-in or come in person, hang out in our office, meet our students in our student lounge in PC 245C. If you have any questions about the Enacting Global Learning micro-credential or the Excellence in Global Learning medallion, feel free to hang out at the end of today's session. I will be here, as well as our Assistant Director, Anna Prado, who you met out in the foyer, to answer any questions that you have. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. Our annual New York Times speaker series, so we have a journalist from the New York Times come and give a special Tuesday Times Roundtable, is on the books. 2 weeks after spring break, so 3 weeks from now, on March 14th at our usual time, 12:30, but not our usual place. We'll be right across the hall in GC 140. If you've never been, it's a much bigger space than this. So March 14th, we welcome Alicia Gupta. She is a gender and health equity reporter from the New York Times, doing her session, The Secret Sauce to Successful Activism. Spoiler alert, it's women. So just in time for Women's History Month. You can learn more information about that at go.fiu.edu/NYT. A couple of events and things to just kind of do a shout out for today, especially because of today's session. I want to do a quick shout out to an upcoming event by the Immigrant Scholars Organization. ISO focuses on current migration topics, celebrating immigrants' contributions to society and supporting immigrant students with resources to navigate higher education. Alicia, President of ISO, past Millennium Fellow, and current Global Learning Medallion candidate, is here with us today. She'll also hang out at today's session, so if you want to talk to her after and hear more about how you can get involved, or join them for their trivia night tomorrow afternoon. And you can get more information by following them on Instagram at ISO_FIU. The other event that we're kind of promoting today, tomorrow, we're having our very first Spring 2023 GL meetup. We're going to meet out in front of the Frost Museum, right next to where Vicky's is, kind of. And we're going to attend Everything Earth and Sky from the Frost Art Museum. It is a special exhibition that they've got going on right now on Haitian art and culture. So we're going to do a specialized Haitian culture edition of the GL meetup tomorrow. We're meeting in front of Vicky's Cafe at 2 p.m. If you are a Global Learning Medallion candidate and you are looking for capstone opportunities, now is definitely the time. I wanted to take a moment to highlight that this Friday, our newsletter will specialize in capstone opportunities because now is the time to look for and apply for summer 2023 opportunities if that's on your radar. If you want some help completing an application, feel free to go to go.fiu.edu/glmeet to set up some time with either myself or Anna, and we can support you through that process. All right, so today's session, Policy Implications on the Future of Immigration, we have Yareliz, who is joining us from the Florida Immigrant Coalition, or FLIC, which is a statewide coalition of grassroots and community organizations, farm workers, youth advocates, lawyers, union members, and more, working together to improve the lives of immigrant communities in Florida. Yareliz was born and raised in Miami, grew up listening to her Nicaraguan family's immigration stories, and constantly draws inspiration from them. She graduated from the University of Florida with a bachelor's degree in English and history, as well as a minor in Latin American Studies. She was a coordinator for the Latina Diaspora in the Americas program, a student government senator. She interned at the Broward Public Defender's Office, was an ambassador at La Casita, a contributor for the Huffington Post Latino Voices, 1/6 of the online Latino Rebels Collective, and currently serves as the federal lead for Florida Immigrant Coalition. Yareliz is passionate about centering voices that were deliberately silenced, a proud feminist, and lives by the Gloria Azindula quote, "Wild tongues cannot be tamed, only cut out." Join me in welcoming today's speaker, Yareliz Mendez-Zamora.
Hi, everyone, and thank you for that very warm welcome. To start us off, I have a couple of questions. How many of y'all here have heard of the program DACA before? All right, we have a couple of hands raised up. How many of y'all know somebody who is DACA-mented, who has DACA? All righty. How many of you have heard that this program is under attack? Okay. Does anybody here want to tell me why they heard that this program is under attack? All right, I see a hand up.
My name is Viviana. I personally have family members who are part of DACA and are enrolled with DACA, and obviously their opportunities for education and living here in the United States has been kind of attacked with the attack of the DACA program itself, and it's obviously been an ongoing conversation in my family for a long time. So it's definitely something that me and my family take very seriously.
Yes. So also to get us started, there's a couple of scenarios posted around the room. And so I see that the room is already split into two parts, and I'm gonna ask if y'all can go ahead, stand up, and walk to the scenarios, and if one person can read each of the scenarios.
So go ahead and read, find one that resonates with you, and we'll come back and we'll talk about them.
Yes.
Feel free to get up.
Sing it with me if you like it. We who believe in freedom and not freedom telling lies. The older I get, the better I know that the secret of my going on.
Each one of y'all can go ahead and choose a representative to come down and grab a sticky note. Y'all are gonna go ahead and write, what would you do? What solutions would you go ahead and think of? So if one of y'all could come down from each of the groups and get a sticky note.
So pick one that resonated with you, and then come grab a sticky note.
And I must be heard. At times I can be quite difficult about no man's word. We believe in freedom and I live. Hear me talking to you. We believe in freedom and not rich until not needing to clutch for power, not needing the light just to shine on me. I need to be one in the number as we stand against tyranny.
Alrighty, y'all. So we're gonna go ahead and read out the scenarios. and choose a representative from your group who's gonna say, this is what my group decided to do. This is the solution that we came up with. So we're gonna go ahead and start with scenario 1.
Hi everyone, I'm Laura, and me and most of my group decided that once this happens, probably the best solution for you would be to find companies.
Read out the scenario to us.
Oh yes. You immigrated to the US when you were 10 years old with your parents. In 2012, you applied for DACA. This is the only protection against deportation that you have. You've never gone back to your country of origin. You graduated from a college and can work because DACA gave you a work permit. However, the Supreme Court has ruled DACA unconstitutional. What do you do? So me and my group decided that probably the best option in this case would be to do research on companies that are sponsoring work visas and go work for that company, and hopefully you can legally work in the US with a work permit or visa. Thank you.
I see that scenario number 2 over there is very sad, very lonely. I don't know if anybody decided to tackle that one, but if I could have a volunteer go ahead and read it. Yeah, just read it out. You don't have to read the solution because it's sad and lonely.
Hello. Okay, it is 2012 and President Obama has just announced DACA. You've been fighting for, is it for?
Yeah.
For the DREAM Act, but will accept any type of relief at this point. However, anyone requesting DACA needs to be under the age of 31. You are 32. Wow, 1 year? That's not fair. You don't qualify for DACA. What do you do next? I don't know. It's a tough situation.
There's one on that side too. Oh, you could. The other side?
Our scenario is Florida's legislature has passed a new law where anyone transporting an inspected but unauthorized immigrant can be charged with a third-degree felony. You have DACA, but your parents are undocumented. You take your parents to work every day. You also have undocumented aunts and uncles. What do you do to keep your family safe? So my group, we talked, and a lot that we've seen, they stay together. So like they learn routines where like, you can avoid certain authority that can, risk family unity, as well as, kind of just all immigrants stay together so that not to like endanger each other. That's one thing. Other than looking for places that sponsor work visas and fighting for citizenship.
All right, we'll go to the last scenario.
Hi, so our scenario is you are a U.S. citizen, but your partner has DACA. Your family disapproves of your relationship and says your partner is only with you for the papers. Florida has passed laws to target immigrants with a new bill, SB 168. Your parents are threatened to call ICE on your partner. What would you do? Our group first explained that even the worst case scenario, even if your parents do call ICE, DACA is a status, so it's not, that's something protecting your partner, but you should talk to your family explaining how DACA is and like how your partner never had a decision, like a say in coming to a new country, and saying how all of this gives them great opportunities and all of that. I think that's the best way to just talk to your family about it.
So, fun fact, all of these are based on real scenarios. So for example, for scenario number 2, there is a famous journalist, Jose Antonio Vargas, who missed the deadline for DACA, even though he had been fighting for some type of relief and is still currently what we call in the shadows. For scenario number 1, this is something that we're facing now, where there is a possibility that DACA is going to be ruled unconstitutional. In fact, the court case has been remanded back to the lower courts. For scenario number 3, there has always been in Florida this battle of the narratives when it comes to immigrants. And in 2012, 2013, 2014, it looked like we were winning. In-state tuition had passed, meaning that folks who had graduated from high schools and went on to colleges wouldn't have to pay international fees. They could go ahead and pay what U.S. citizens and residents were paying. So instead of having to take one class a semester because that was all you could afford, you could go ahead and take the classroom that you could. And for scenario number 4, how many of y'all have been or know of parents who disapprove of relationships, right? But it becomes a little bit more tricky when the person that you're with doesn't have an immigration status and your family disapproves and is threatening to call ICE. Fun fact, ICE can show up to your house. We at FLIC have Know Your Rights trainings, so then that way you know what to do if ICE shows up at your house, if you get pulled over by an officer. How did that exercise feel? I just want to get 1 or 2 words.
I was gonna say like the same thing because I guess you never know what others going through, so it makes you realize you're aware of other issues that you need to be an advocate for.
Definitely. So there have been multiple struggles for some type of immigration reform. Earlier, when President Biden was elected, he wanted to pass Build Back Better. Within Build Back Better, there would have been citizenship for DACA, for TPS holders, which is temporary protective status. And this is something that gives folks from certain countries, up to 18 months of protections from deportations and a work permit. It would have also included citizenship for certain agricultural workers and for essential workers. Unfortunately, this failed, and folks are left without any type of relief. I want to talk a little bit about DACA, the history of DACA, why it's important, and what failures does it have as a policy. Because again, there's a very complicated history behind DACA, because how many of y'all have heard of the DREAM Act before? Awesome. Can somebody explain to me what the DREAM Act is? It's okay, now we're going to learn together today.
I know that it creates the status for dreamers.
Yes. Yes, it does. And so this is a reflection opportunity, and it's from a poem by Warson Shire, Teaching My Mother How to Give Birth. When I meet others like me, I recognize the longing, the missing, the memory of ash on their faces. No one leaves home unless home is the mouth of a shark. What in the world happened here? I promise, y'all. Try to fix it. So, back in the early 2000s, there was the battle for the DREAM Act. And so the DREAM Act would have given status to multiple young individuals who had come to the United States and basically give them the pathway to residency and ultimately citizenship. Because a lot of folks don't even know that they were undocumented up until the moment where they were applying for colleges, and their parents had to sit them down and say, you're not going to be able to have the same opportunities as your peers. This is the opportunity that we have for you, and unfortunately, a lot of the times it was working in the shadows. It was working under the table. And so you had young folks who came together and said, we need a solution. We need something. And thus, they decided to go ahead and try to pass the DREAM Act. The DREAM Act has had many iterations and has been introduced into legislation multiple times. However, for something to pass and become legislation, it needs to pass through the House, it needs to pass through the Senate, and then ultimately go ahead and be signed into law by the President. So those are the three crucial steps for something becoming law. The DREAM Act would either die in the House or in the Senate between, whichever party was in power of the certain chamber at that time. So in 2012, through executive action, President Obama presented the DACA program. It's important for us to note that this was an executive action because there's a difference between executive actions and executive orders. Executive actions are legally binding and executive orders are not. Executive actions are published in the Federal Register Notice, which is where they publish whether or not TPS has passed, what are some of the new immigration laws, what is UCIS saying, etc. So it's important for us to know that terminology. So why is DACA under attack? In 2017, then President Trump tried to end the DACA program. He said, you want to know what? This isn't working out, goodbye. And a lot of the narrative around DACA was that these are people who don't deserve it. They're here illegally. We don't want them here. They're stealing our jobs. How many of y'all have heard that narrative? Yeah. And so when there was this when there was a racist undertone to all of these policies, they decided we're going to end this program. And so Texas and 8 other states also sued to end the program. They were saying, you want to know what? We as states are being negatively impacted by this. There's a Supreme Court case that says that even if the child is undocumented, you have to provide free public school education. This is causing mayhem in our schools. We're the ones who have to also go ahead and pay just in case there are any medical emergencies. And these are racist narratives that are being formed. So last year, the court case was ruled unconstitutional by the 5th Circuit Court, and they remanded it back to the lower courts. In other words, they sent back the court case to the other court that had already found DACA unconstitutional and said, you deal with it. We know that probably this is going to go all the way to the Supreme Court, and we know that DACA is dying, it's gasping its last very painful breaths. And it's because the Supreme Court, not the Supreme Court, the 5th Court said that President Obama acted above his executive powers, and that this should have gone through legislation. This should have gone through Congress. It's up to Congress to fix this issue. However, we know that currently there is a divided government and Congress has been unable to pass the DREAM Act or any type of legislation, because there have been multiple iterations of this. There's been the DREAM Act, there's been the Dream and Promise Act. There have been, again, so many times that people have gotten their hopes up. In fact, there was this one tweet that said, I'm not even excited that that dream got introduced again in 2023, because if I had $1 for every time that the DREAM Act was introduced and then died, I would have a good chunk of change. So what are the requirements for DACA? It's a pretty long, extensive list, but they have to have been under the age of 31. I know people who were 32 and were unable to get DACA, and so they live in the shadows to this day. You had to have come while you were under the age of 16. You had to have lived continuously in the U.S. from June 15, 2007. You entered without inspection or fell out of the lawful visa status, because a lot of the times, immigrants who come to the United States and are left undocumented, they overstay their visas. So it's not this mayhem at the southern border. It's that a lot of folks overstay their visas. Are currently in school, have graduated from high school, obtained a GED, or have been dishonorably charged from the armed forces. But yeah, so there are vets who served,
especially after 2001, and then they were deported. And they're stuck in their country of origin in places that they had never been before, because they wanted to go ahead and serve the place that they considered their country, and then were faced with a discharge and said, go back to your country. Thank you so much for your service. Goodbye. And don't pose a national threat or a public safety issue. Have not been convicted of a felony offense or a significant misdemeanor or more than 3 misdemeanors of any kind. However, we know that in the United States, Black and brown bodies are criminalized constantly. So who has DACA? There are about 600,000 individuals who have DACA currently. However, over the course of its existence, DACA has protected over 830,000 individuals. There are over 960 US citizens who live with a DACA recipient. So the day that DACA dies and there's not anything that can catch folks and they're left undocumented, and like scenario 3, something like that passes, you're left out in limbo. The average DACA recipient is 28 years old, and about 11,000 DACA recipients are Black immigrants. A lot of the times when we have the conversation around immigration, Black immigrants are left behind, Asian Pacific Islander immigrants are left behind, and the focus becomes on Latine individuals. And so there have been multiple Black immigrant organizations that have raised the alarm and said, this policy does not do enough. This policy does not protect this. We know that Black immigrants, again, are constantly criminalized. And when it comes to APIA voices, they're not even included in the narrative sometimes. So that is one of the policy failures of DACA. And so here's the last reflection opportunity around what does it mean when you flee your home because it is literally the mouth of a shark. Because in countries like Mauritania, which is currently fighting for TPS, there is modern day slavery. In countries like Syria, there was a civil war. And now with the earthquakes that had just happened, we know that those conditions are being exacerbated. When we talk about Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, the economic opportunities are not there and the political situations are often violent. And to send back folks who, again, have not seen their countries of origins in more than a decade sometimes is cruel. And within the immigrant rights movement, there is also this very nuanced conversation around whether or not DACA has created this sense of complacency. Because in 2010, there was something called the Trail of Dreams. And so 4 dreamers walked from Miami all the way to Washington, D.C. It was a trek of over 4,000 miles, and it took them 4 months to get to Washington, D.C. to meet with President Obama and say, I need help. I need to stay with my family. I have not gone back to my country of origin for X amount of years. And actually, fun fact, one of the people who are at the foundation of the Florida Immigrant Coalition walked that Trail of Dreams. And they were confronted by folks who said, you're not really human. You broke the law. Why should I care about you? That was actually one of the things that happened in North Carolina. Because you got to walk through the South. You got to walk through Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, West Virginia, etc., to get to where you need to get to. And so the song that we were playing in the beginning, Those Who Believe in Freedom Cannot Rest, Ella's song, was the song that they would sing whenever they got tired. Because again, it's not that you can get into a car, because it was a commitment to say, we're going to walk this. And we're going to get national press to pay attention to us. I want to stop here and see if there are any questions.
What was the reason for only including people that were under 32, under 31 in the DACA? Or like other, you know?
So what ends up happening is that when we started telling stories about dreamers, remember a lot of it was focused on young people. And so they said, man, if you're over 31, that's it, you're not young anymore, basically. Like, it was a decision made by then President Obama's administration to make the cutoff date.
I have a question.
Yes.
When it's people migrating to the United States from like European countries, usually, obviously not with black skin, they're more open to that. Like, they would be considered like expats or just regular people coming to make America better. But when it's like from Spanish countries or, you know, countries where the people aren't Eurocentric, then they're considered like, oh, they're taking our jobs and they're not aiding to the betterness of the United States. Why is that?
I don't have an answer to that question. I wish I did. The only answer that I have is that we have a broken immigration system that has been racist from the very beginning. Because remember that one of the first exclusion laws that were ever passed by the United States was the Chinese Exclusion Act of 18 no sé qué, 18 I don't know when. And so that's been our legacy. That's been our history. And I wish I could tell you why people don't care about black and brown immigrants who are fleeing violence, who are fleeing poverty, who are fleeing gangs. I wish I could tell you.
DACA recipients. Hi, can DACA like recipients apply for a green card, or like how does the immigration process work with that?
So from my understanding with DACA, it doesn't lead to a clear pathway to citizenship, right? It's not like, oh, you want to know what? After you've had DACA for 5 years, you can go ahead and apply for your green card, apply for your residency, get all the way to citizenship, and you're safe. That's why with the current court case decision, we're worried. Because what are we going to do when 600,000 people lose their status, the only status protecting them from deportations? So I said in the beginning, right, that over 800,000 people around there have been protected by DACA throughout the course of the existence of the program. You know, doing the math, that means that about 200,000 have found some type of pathway, whether that's that, you know, they married their U.S. citizen partner and said, here we go. Or maybe they had a child who asked for them. But not everybody has that luck.
Thank you. I've heard, I don't know if this is true, about this like visa lottery, like where some people can enter to get like green cards. Like every year, like the immigration does like a visa lottery. Why instead of doing that, just focus on giving like DACA a better pathway instead of like just focusing on that visa lottery?
Again, I wish I had an answer for that question, because our immigration system sucks. Our immigration system doesn't really provide a clear answer for that. I wish. But with what we've been seeing from the court cases is that they're all saying, do something legislatively, pass a law, as if it was that simple.
I know you're very involved in everything that here in Florida, specifically with immigration. Is there anything that, like, any recommendations or specific things that we can do to help this like effort kind of inform ourselves, help other people inform themselves about what DACA is and just how messed up everything is?
Yeah, definitely. The first thing I would say is get involved. Get involved. Look up organizations that are doing this type of work. I recommend getting involved with us, FLIC, AFSC, American Friends Service Committee, Miami Workers Center, We Count. There are organizations here who are doing this type of work, who are saying either we need immigration reform, or we need permanent protections, or we need TPS. We're going to piecemeal this bit by bit by bit until we get to where we need to be.
Just to answer your question too, like if anybody is interested in talking about immigration in Tallahassee, I can contact you with Florida Student Power. We're going to Tallahassee in March. And then, wait, I also had a question.
Yeah, while you think about it, fun fact, Florida Student Power is also one of our members. And so we've worked with them a lot, and they have really, again, led a lot of the youth movement. The Florida Immigrant Youth Network is another one. And so if you haven't heard about Florida Student Power, I invite y'all to get involved, to learn a little bit more, and to say, I'm here, I'm present, I want to be an ally, or I'm directly impacted, and I'm willing to share my story. Share your stories. Share the stories of your family members, because you want to know what? If we're silent, and I'm forgetting who said this quote, that if you're silent about your pain, they'll kill you and say you enjoyed it.
My question, Miami just passed Miami Community ID, so that would give undocumented immigrants and other people just like a nice type of identification. It's not a license or anything, but it just provides some type of ID. Do you think, like, how does that work with, for example, in scenario 3 that they're talking about, can ICE go up to a person and ask them if they're undocumented, or ask them for an ID, and what are their rights if ICE stops you and you're undocumented?
So, also fun fact, we've been helping with community IDs. And so with community IDs, as you mentioned, you're right, it's not a license. It's not something that is a form of federal identification. It's not even, in fact, something that is a state level of identification. It's at the county level. So Broward County and Miami-Dade County have passed this program saying, you want to know what? We want to help not just immigrants, but folks who were formerly incarcerated and may not have an ID, folks who are experiencing houselessness and may not have an ID, get some type of identification that has their name, their date of birth, where they may or may not reside, so that they can go ahead and pick up their kids from school, that they can maybe open up a bank account. I know that Regions is one of the banks who's doing that. And so with scenario 3, it's still not a complete safeguard because it's not a federal form of identification. And what are your rights when ICE goes ahead, or maybe a police officer stops you? The first thing, and it's hard to do, it's extremely hard to do, is that you remain calm, and if you have a passenger in the car, that they also remain calm. Because, again, you have rights. If a police officer stops you, remain calm, ask them, you know, you do have to identify yourself if they ask for your name. So if I'm stopped and somebody asks for my name, yeah, my name is Yareliz. And do not speak more than what you have to. You have the right to an attorney. Regardless of your immigration status in this country, you have the right to an attorney. You have the right to remain silent. And you also have the right to speak to your consulate. So those are 3 extremely important things to remember. And you can ask, officer, why did you stop me? If ICE shows up to your house or to your work, one of the things that you can ask for is if they have something from the judge. If they have an order from the judge that they can come into your home. Do not open the door. Ask them to either slide it through or to have them put it in the window. And that way you can read it and make sure that it is a warrant. Because oftentimes folks will lie and say that it's a warrant when it's not. A warrant needs to be signed by a judge.
One question is, so when it comes to, I guess, arguing with other Latinos who might be against DACA, how do you deal with those conversations, especially those who do come from Latin descendancy and such?
So one of the things that I found that has been useful is to identify the fear. Why is this person scared that another person needs protection? Is it because they feel like something is being taken away from them? An opportunity is being taken away from them? What are some of the false narratives that they've heard about DACA? There is a tool that can be used in any conversation that you have, which is called raza. It's 4 things. The first one is that you receive the information. The second one is that you acknowledge the other person. You know, it doesn't have to be like, I affirm you or anything like that. It can be, I acknowledge what you said. You summarize what they've said. I heard you say that you hate the DACA program because it allows folks who are here without what you think is the proper documentation to remain in this country. And then you ask a question. You ask them, you can ask them, why does that make you scared? I want to hear more. And it's difficult to hear people dehumanize you or to dehumanize your friends. But it is through having those difficult conversations that we can create unlikely allies. Back when, I'm forgetting the year, but way back when, Flick had started a campaign against CCA, which is the corporate something of America. And so they wanted to go ahead and build a private prison in Pembroke Pines. And so what we did was that we had those difficult conversations and we had unlikely allies come out and speak. We're not going to get those unlikely allies until we've had those difficult conversations, heard them out, and battled the false narratives that are so ingrained in our community's heads. And we get them to acknowledge the fact that for a lot of Cuban migrants, when they came over, they had access to Medicaid, Social Security, etc., all of these things that a lot of times aren't accessible to folks like my family who came from Nicaragua. We get to acknowledge the fact that Haitians who were immigrating, like at one point President Biden was thinking about sticking them in Guantanamo, and Guantanamo had originally been also one of the detention centers, and that there were massive human rights violations going on there. We need to inform ourselves, educate ourselves about the history. NPR has an amazing podcast about this, and I invite all of y'all to listen to it.
I have another question as well. So, with the ongoing battle of DREAM, how would DACA kids apply to college and still receive like financial aid or some sort of aid to pay for their college tuition?
So right now, DACA is not accepting any new applications. DREAM has not yet passed into law. So DREAM is like still a long, long ways far from us. Because DACA is not accepting any new applications, we actually have a new wave of undocumented youth who are coming up. And unfortunately, Congress doesn't want to pass a solution for them just yet. So what does save us, though, is in-state tuition. So because we have in-state tuition, and always in-state tuition is a fragile thing, right? Because we have in-state tuition, folks who graduated from high school are able to go ahead and apply for certain things. You have to be strategic and you have to be creative in the ways that you look for scholarships.
Oh, I know there's a scholarship called Dreamers, which gives DACA, they pay for your full school and stuff like that. I just saw it and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah. Like I said, you have to get creative. I think is there space for one more question, or do folks feel, the weight of hopelessness? I also don't want to leave y'all hopeless because y'all are the next generation. Y'all are hopefully going to go ahead and become the legislators who are going to have the solutions for this. Your voice is crucial. As students, you hold and you wield more power than you know. I wish I was a student back And I wish I knew all of this so that I could organize my colleges and say, you want to know what? We have to join Florida Student Power and see what they're doing. We have to join FLIC. We have to join AFSC. What are some of the youth programs that are going on? How do I fight against unjust laws that are being passed in Tallahassee? All of that is also up in your hands. Bless you.
Can I ask one question?
Yes.
What's one thing that you're optimistic about looking forward in the policies and things that are in the pipeline?
So, unfortunately, there's not a lot to be optimistic about what we're hearing that's coming down the pipeline. During special session, the governor passed SB 6B, which creates a migrant transportation program. It's funded by $10 million of our taxpayer money to go ahead and transport unauthorized migrants outside of the state of Florida. This is a continued attack on immigrant families, especially those who are waiting for reunification. But again, what makes me hopeful is the fact that, number one, y'all are sitting here listening to his presentation and that y'all have been active. I again want to emphasize how much power the youth has, how much power you have. If you go ahead and you talk to 10 of your other friends and you say, I heard this presentation, do you want to come with me to a community meeting? How can we learn more? That's already 11 of y'all who are fighting. If you ask one of your family members, mami, papi, tío, or one of your cousins, I want to hear more about your story, that's you creating a connection that may not have been available to you before. And if you ask them, do you mind if we can find places where you can share your story? Or maybe you can go ahead and write an opinion piece for the local newspaper. That's already another way. We are not going to win this unless we transform the narrative. And that's going to be done by sharing our stories, by sharing your knowledge. And again, as the youth, you have so much power. Don't waste it. And I'm done.
One more time for Yareliz for this very, very powerful presentation. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. That's a wrap for today's session. You can join us again in 2 weeks. One happy spring break next week. And then welcome back the week after, where we'll have, I love this title, Shut Up and Talk, a real conversation about students' free speech rights by Alison Mautuli. She's a criminal justice professor here at FIU. So thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again in 2 weeks.